How to respond when he reaches out after silence. I am Bonang Matheba, and right now at 2:13 inches in the morning, my phone just lit up on the nightstand like a tiny moon refusing to stay quiet. The screen says one name, the one I told myself I was done reading. And the message is only 2 words. Hey stranger, my heart does that old familiar flip, the one that used to feel like fireworks, but tonight feels more like a warning shot. I'm lying in my apartment in Johannesburg. The city's still humming faintly through the cracked window, and every part of me wants to swipe open, type back something clever, something that proves I'm fine, that I've been thriving, that his silence never carved a canyon in my chest. But I don't. I roll onto my side, press the phone face down, and stare at the ceiling like it owes me answers. Sisters, if you've ever been here, you know the drill. The sudden heat in your cheeks, the way your thumbs hover like they have muscle memory for heartbreak. I let the screen go dark. I count my breaths 1, 2, 3 until the room stops spinning. Because this moment, this tiny vibration in the dark, isn't an invitation to fall back into the story we already closed. It's a test. And the first rule of passing any test worth your peace is refusing to rush the answer. I slide out of bed, bare feet on cool tile, and walk to the kitchen. I pour water into a glass I bought in Cape Town last year, the one with the gold rim that catches whatever light is left. I drink slow, tasting nothing but the metallic edge of adrenaline. My reflection in the window looks calmer than I feel, and I realize that's the trick. Act like the woman you're becoming until the feeling catches up. The phone buzzes again, probably a double text, the universal sign of someone who knows they left scorch marks and now wants to see if the ground is still warm. I don't check. I set the glass in the sink and whisper to the quiet, not tonight. Because tonight, I choose me first. And choosing me starts with letting the silence stretch until it teaches him what it taught me. The city keeps breathing outside, taxi lights streaking gold across the walls, and I stand there long enough to remember that my worth was never in his inbox. It's right here, in the steady beat under my ribs, in the decision to wait until sunrise before I decide if his 2 words deserve even one of mine. That's how the test begins, my loves, with the courage to leave the question unanswered until your soul is the one holding the pen. The nights I used to cry in the bathroom started long before this 2 a.m. text, back when the silence was still fresh and sharp like a paper cut you keep reopening. I'd lock the door, turn the shower on hot so the steam would swallow my sobs, and sit on the fuzzy pink bath mat my mom sent from Durban because she said every queen needs something soft under her feet. The water would drum against the tiles, and I'd let the questions pour out. Why wasn't I enough? What did I miss? How does someone vanish after saying forever like it was easy? I'd trace the fog on the mirror, writing his name and then smearing it away with my palm as if erasing the letters could erase the ache. Those were the nights I learned the difference between lonely and alone. Lonely is a scream with no echo. Alone is the quiet that finally lets you hear yourself. I kept a towel over the mirror after a while because I couldn't stand the red eyes staring back, accusing me of still caring. But one night, maybe 3 months in, the crying stopped mid-sob. The water was still running, the room still thick with heat, but something shifted. I looked at the puddle forming around my knees and thought, this is his mess, not mine. I stood up, turned the faucet off, and the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of me. I wrapped myself in the robe that smells like vanilla and shea, the one I bought on a solo trip to Mauritius because I wanted to prove I could book a beach chair for one. I opened the bathroom door and the apartment didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt like headquarters. That was the night I stopped asking why he left and started asking what I was going to build while he was gone. I made tea, chamomile with a spoon of honey, and I sat on the couch scrolling through old photos, not to torture myself, but to catalog the smiles I'd forgotten were mine before he ever took credit for them. I found one from a rooftop party in Mabaneng, my locks flying in the wind, laughing so hard my eyes were slits, and I thought, there she is. She didn't disappear, she was just waiting for the noise to quiet down. The tears still came after that, but they were different, cleaner, like rain that knows the drought is over. I started leaving the bathroom door open, letting the steam drift into the hallway because I wasn't hiding anymore. I bought plants, named them after women who raised me, and watered them on Sundays while listening to Nina Simone. Every green leaf was proof that nurturing doesn't require another person's permission. By the time his name lit up my phone months later, those bathroom nights had turned into bedtime stories I told myself about resilience. They reminded me that the girl who once sat on a bath mat sobbing had already graduated to the woman who could let a text message blink itself out without flinching. The silence he gave me became the runway I used to take off. And tonight, with the gold-rimmed glass still dripping in the sink, I'm gliding at altitude, too high for two careless words to clip my wings. The lesson those nights carved into my bones is simple but fierce. Your tears are allowed to fall, but they must water the ground you're standing on, not the grave of what's already dead. I didn't call my best friend Lerato until the sun was threatening the horizon, painting the kitchen in cautious pinks. 3 minutes. That's all I gave myself on the clock before I hung up, because I knew if I lingered, she'd hear the tremor I was still swallowing. The phone rang twice before her sleepy voice answered, "B, it's not even 6, whose heart we breaking today." I laughed, the sound surprising us both, and spilled the whole thing 2:13 a.m. "Hey, stranger," the way my chest tried to sprint back to last year. She listened like only Lerato can, no gasps, no drama, just the soft rustle of her turning over in bed, the way she does when she's locking in. Then she said, "Remember the night you helped me delete his number after he pulled the same vanishing act? You told me, don't let nostalgia ghostwrite your future. Same energy, queen." I closed my eyes and saw us on her balcony, passing a bottle of rosé, watching the city blink below while I coached her through the urge to text, "I miss you" at 1 a.m. She'd cried into my shoulder that night, mascara smudging my silk blouse, and I'd held her until the shaking stopped, promising that the ache would shrink to the size of a pebble she could skip across the Atlantic. Now here she was, skipping it back to me. "He's poking the bear to see if the cage is still open," she continued, voice low and warm like morning coffee. "Close it, lock it, throw the key into the braai and let it melt." I laughed again, louder this time, and the sound bounced off the high ceilings, filling space his silence once occupied. Lerato yawned, then added the knockout punch. "You spent months becoming a whole meal. Don't let a snack think he can slide back into the kitchen." 3 minutes exactly. I glanced at the time and I felt the fog lift. I told her I loved her, that I'd bring brunch on Sunday, that I was keeping the cage locked until I decided whether the zoo even needed his exhibit. She mumbled something about pancakes and hung up. I stood in the kitchen, phone in one hand, the other pressed to my sternum like I was holding the new blueprint of my heart in place. Lerato didn't tell me what to feel. She reminded me who I'd already become while he was gone. That short call was a mirror held at the perfect angle, reflecting the woman who chooses sisters over stumbles, the one who knows that real love doesn't need a rescue, it needs a reservation, made in advance with proof of changed behavior attached. As the sun finally breached the building, spilling gold across the counter, I deleted the notification without opening it. The message stayed unread, a tiny unopened envelope in a drawer I no longer rummaged through at midnight. Lerato's voice lingered like incense. "Don't let nostalgia ghostwrite your future." And with the morning loud and clear around me, I decided the only story I'm authoring from now on is the one where the heroine answers the door only after she's finished decorating the house inside her chest. That's the power of a 3-minute call at dawn. It doesn't just wake your friend. It wakes the part of you that was never really asleep, only waiting for the right alarm. The afternoon sun was already high when I finally sat at the little wooden desk in the corner of my living room, the one I rescued from a thrift shop in Melville because it had scars that matched mine. I pulled out the leather-bound journal my sister gave me for Christmas, the cover still smelling faintly of the lavender sachet she tucked inside. The pages were thick, cream-colored, waiting like blank promises, and I flipped past the entries from months ago, angry scrawls about cancelled plans, hearts doodled around his initials, question marks so dark they tore the paper. Today felt different. My pen hovered, then landed, and the first words spilled out, messy and true. He texted at 2:13 a.m. "Hey, stranger." I didn't answer. Good for me. The ink bled a little, because my hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer force of holding everything in. I wrote about the flip in my stomach, the way hope tried to sneak in wearing nostalgia's clothes, the exact second I decided to pour water instead of tears. Sisters, if you've never let a journal catch your chaos, you're missing the cheapest therapy on earth. I filled 3 pages without stopping every what if, every memory of his laugh in the car on the way to Soweto, the way he used to trace my palm, like he was reading a map to forever. Then I turned the page and wrote the ugly stuff. The nights I refreshed his Instagram stories at 3 a.m., the lie I told my mother about why we stopped posting couple pics, the voicemail I saved for 2 weeks before deleting because hearing his voice felt like pressing a bruise. The pen scratched louder as the truth got sharper. I asked the page, why now? What changed in his world that suddenly made mine worth revisiting? Is it loneliness or legacy? Did someone else walk away and now I'm the soft landing? The questions lined up like soldiers, and for the first time I didn't flinch from their gaze. I drew a line down the middle of the next page, left side. What he did, right side. What I deserve, left, disappeared for 97 days without a word. Right, consistency that doesn't need a calendar reminder. Left, made excuses about figuring himself out. Right, a man who figures it out beside me, not instead of me. The list grew until the right side spilled onto another page, and I realized my standards weren't a wish list, they were a blueprint. I wrote about the version of me who would have answered at 2:14 a.m., thumbs flying with forgiveness she hadn't earned for herself yet. I thanked her for trying, then gently closed the door on her. By the time I capped the pen, the sun had shifted, throwing long shadows across the floorboards, and the apartment smelled like possibility instead of yesterday. I tore out the old pages, the ones dripping with desperation, and folded them into a tiny square. I carried them to the kitchen, lit a match from the box I keep for candles, and watched the flames eat the past. The smoke curled up like it was waving goodbye, and I opened the window to let it out. The journal stayed open on the desk, new pages waiting, and I underlined the last sentence twice. My story doesn't need his edit. That evening, I slid the journal into the drawer next to my bed, right beside the silk eye mask I wear when I want to dream on my own terms. The act of writing didn't erase the text message, it just made it smaller, a footnote instead of a headline. And footnotes, my loves, don't get to dictate the chapter. The next morning I laced up my sneakers before the city fully woke, the air still cool enough to forgive the heat it would become. I stepped out onto the street in Rosebank, earbuds in but no music playing, because sometimes silence is the playlist you need. The pavement was uneven in places, cracked like old promises, and I matched my stride to the rhythm of women walking to work, some in heels clicking purpose, others in tackies carrying dreams in plastic bags. I passed the coffee shop where he and I used to argue over who made better cappuccino art, and I didn't slow down. The barista waved. I waved back, smiling for real this time. Johannesburg has a way of moving even when you're standing still, and I let it pull me forward. I turned down a side street lined with jacaranda trees just starting to drop purple confetti on the ground, and I thought about how seasons don't ask permission to change. I walked past murals of Bonang Matheba and Brenda Fassie, their eyes painted fierce and kind, and I felt them watching, nodding like, yes girl, keep going. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably work, probably Lerato sending a meme, but I left it. The rule I made in the journal was now law. No screens until I've moved my body and remembered the world is bigger than one man's timing. I reached the park where old men play chess on stone tables, their laughter rough and free, and I sat on a bench for a minute. A little girl chased bubbles, her braids flying, and when one popped on my knee, she giggled like the universe had told a joke. I laughed too, the sound surprising me, and I realized joy doesn't need an invitation either. I stood up and kept walking, past the rose garden that smells like my grandmother's hugs, past the runner who nodded like we were in on the same secret. Sweat started to bead along my hairline, and I welcomed it proof that my heart was pumping for me, not for him. By the time I looped back to my building, the sun was fully awake, and so was I. I stopped at the corner cafe, ordered an iced Americano with oat milk, and sipped it on the patio while watching delivery bikes weave through traffic. The city didn't pause when he left, and it didn't speed up when he texted. It just kept being Johannesburg, loud, flawed, beautiful, mine. I finished the coffee, crushed the cup, and tossed it in the bin with a perfect arc. My legs felt strong, my lungs clear, and the text message that had hijacked my night now felt like a postcard from a country I no longer visited. Walking home, I passed a woman watering her balcony garden, and she called down, "Morning, sis, you glowing." I looked up, shaded my eyes, and shouted back, trying to match the jacarandas. We both laughed and I kept moving. The key turned in the lock smooth as ever, and I kicked off my shoes by the door, leaving traces of purple petals on the mat. I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, drank half in one go, and stood in the middle of the living room feeling the quiet settle like dust after a dance. My body had carried me 3 miles without once asking if he was watching, and that was its own kind of victory. The walk didn't answer whether I'd ever reply to his message. It answered who gets to decide the pace of my days, and that person, dripping sweat and smiling at strangers, was undeniably, unshakably me. Later that night, after a shower that washed away the salt and the city, I sat on the couch with my laptop open to a blank document titled Peephole. I'd heard the phrase years ago from my auntie who never opened the door for anyone without looking first, and tonight it felt like the perfect metaphor for the heart. I typed fast, the way ideas come when you're not forcing them. You don't swing the door wide for every knock, you check the peephole. His second message had come while I was walking, just okay with a period, the digital equivalent of a shrug. I screenshot it, dropped it into the document, and stared at the tiny gray bubble like it was evidence in a trial. Then I started listing what I could see through the peephole of his actions. 97 days of nothing, then 2 words at 2 a.m., then a single syllable when I didn't bite. I zoomed out and looked at the pattern the way detectives look at security footage frame by frame. No sound, just behavior. The cursor blinked, waiting, and I wrote, "If the preview is this underwhelming, imagine the full movie." I laughed out loud, the sound echoing off the high ceilings, because humor is armor when truth gets heavy. I opened another tab and pulled up our old chat thread, scrolled to the last real conversation, him saying he needed space, me saying take all you need, both of us pretending forever wasn't crumbling. I highlighted his final message, copied it, pasted it under the new OK, and watched the echo stare back at me. Same energy, different font. I closed the laptop, walked to the window, and looked out at the city lights blinking like they were gossiping about us all. The peephole wasn't just about him, it was about every man who'd ever knocked and expected me to forget the last time they left the stove on. I thought about the women I mentor, the ones who text me at midnight asking if they're overreacting for wanting consistency. I imagined telling them to install a peephole in their chest, small, round, unbreakable. Look first, always. I grabbed my phone, finally ready to face the screen, and opened the message thread. "Hey stranger," sat there, then okay. I held the power button until the option to delete appeared, but I didn't press it yet. This wasn't about erasing, it was about observing. I turned on the voice memo app instead and recorded myself saying, "Day 1 of peephole living. He showed up with crumbs. I'm not hungry for crumbs anymore." I played it back, my voice steady, Johannesburg accent wrapping around the words like a hug. Then I saved the memo, labeled it evidence, and locked the phone. I poured a glass of red wine, the one I'd been saving for a celebration that didn't need a +1, and raised it to the skyline. The peephole wasn't a barrier, it was a filter, letting in light but keeping out drafts. And tonight, with the wine warming my throat and the city humming its lullaby, I felt the door of my heart reinforced, not closed, just selective. The man who wanted in would have to stand in the hallway long enough for me to see the full picture, not just the shadow he cast when the light was dim. I finished the wine, rinsed the glass, and crawled into bed with the windows cracked so the night air could tuck me in. The phone stayed on the nightstand, face down, but for the first time in forever, its silence didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like permission. The peephole was installed, the view was clear, and whatever came next would have to pass inspection under my terms, my timing, my light. That's the beauty of a heart that learns to look before it leaps. It lands exactly where it chooses. The next morning, I woke up with the taste of red wine still on my tongue and a decision crystallizing like dew on the window pane. Boundaries aren't walls. They're the velvet rope outside the VIP section of my life. I rolled out of bed, slipped into the emerald satin robe my stylist sent from New York, and padded to the kitchen where the coffee machine hissed like it was gossiping about last night. While the dark roast dripped, I grabbed a stack of pastel Post-its from the drawer, the ones shaped like crowns because every reminder should feel royal, and started writing the new house rules. Rule 1, no replies after 10 p.m. because my piece has a curfew and it's strictly enforced. Rule 2, any conversation deeper than weather requires a real apology first. The kind that names the hurt, instead of stepping over it. Rule 3. Consistency isn't a vibe, it's a verb, and I need to see it conjugated in present tense for at least 30 days before I even consider future tense. I stuck the post-its along the mirror in the hallway, a neon pink and mint green gallery of self-respect. The coffee finished brewing, filling the apartment with that nutty aroma that makes Monday feel like it might behave, and I carried the mug to the balcony. Johannesburg was already hustling taxis, honking their horn symphonies, school kids in uniforms laughing too loud for 7 a.m., and I leaned against the railing, letting the steam curl around my face like incense. My phone buzzed on the table behind me, and I didn't flinch. I knew who it was before I looked. Another message, this time a voice note, 37 seconds of his baritone trying to sound casual. I let it sit unplayed, crown-shaped post-it number 4 glowing in my mind. Access is earned, not assumed. I sipped the coffee slow, tasting the bittersweet the way I now taste promises carefully. By the time the mug was empty, I'd added rule 5. If he gets mad because I'm not moving at his speed, that's the exit interview I didn't have to schedule. I walked back inside, rinsed the cup, and placed it upside down on the drying rack like I was setting a place setting for the woman I'm becoming. The phone buzzed again twice this time, the universal code for impatience, and I smiled at the ceiling because boundaries have a sound, and it's the sweetest silence when someone realizes the rope isn't moving. I opened the closet, picked the red power suit I wore to my first magazine cover shoot, and laid it across the bed. Today wasn't about him. It was about me walking into rooms like I owned the deed. I got dressed while humming Beyoncé's Freedom, the bass line thumping in my chest like a second heartbeat. Before I left, I snapped a photo of the post-it mirror and sent it to Lerato with the caption, VIP list updated. No +1s without background checks. She replied with a string of fire emojis and a voice note of her own. Period, queen. Velvet rope stays velvet. I slipped the phone into my purse, grabbed my keys, and stepped into the hallway where the echo of my heels sounded like applause. The elevator ride down felt like descending into a new act, and when the doors opened to the lobby, the security guard greeted me with the usual "Morning, Miss B." But today I heard the respect in it, the kind earned by a woman who knows her worth isn't up for negotiation. Outside, the sun hit the pavement just right, turning the cracks into gold veins, and I walked to my car with the kind of stride that makes traffic lights change out of courtesy. The boundaries weren't punishment, they were the guest list to my peace, and anyone who couldn't RSVP with grace didn't get a seat at the table. That's the thing about velvet ropes, my loves. They don't keep love out. They keep chaos on the wait list until it learns how to behave. 2 nights later, the test came in real time. I was curled on the couch in cashmere socks, watching a rom-com I'd seen a dozen times, because sometimes you need to remember that Hollywood endings don't require real-life auditions. The phone lit up at 11:47 p.m. past curfew, crown posted glowing like a neon commandment, and his name flashed with a barrage of texts. "You're really ignoring me?" I said I was sorry. "This is childish." I read them with the volume off, heart steady, because the velvet rope was up and the bouncer was me. I set the phone face down, muted the movie, and walked to the kitchen where the chamomile was waiting like an old friend. While the kettle hummed, I replayed the apology in my head. Sorry for what exactly? For disappearing? For the 2 a.m. Timing? For thinking 2 words and a voice note were enough to undo 97 days of radio silence? The water boiled, and I poured it over the tea bag, watching the color bleed golden the way truth bleeds when you stop pretending. I carried the mug back to the couch, pulled a throw blanket over my legs, and opened the journal to a fresh page. I wrote the text verbatim, then underneath. Reaction I wanted, defend, explain, soften. Reaction I chose, observe, protect, elevate. The pen felt heavier tonight, like it was carving the words into stone instead of paper. I flipped back to the blueprint page and added a new column, How Violations Feel. Under it, small, sharp, familiar. Then I wrote the antidote, space, standards, sisterhood. The phone buzzed, again another voice note, longer this time, his tone edging into frustration. I didn't play it. Instead, I opened the group chat with my girls and sent a screenshot of the new texts with the caption, "Velvet rope holding strong, send reinforcements." Within seconds, the chat exploded. Lerato with a gif of a bouncer crossing his arms. My cousin Thandi sending a voice note screaming, "Not on my watch!" in isiZulu. My mentor Naledi dropping a Bible verse about guarding your heart like it was a palace. Their love poured through the screen like sunlight through blinds, and I laughed so hard the tea slowed. I recorded a reply. "Y'all are my security detail," and the cover charge just went up. The rom-com was paused on the scene where the heroine chooses herself in the rain, and I unpaused it, letting the dialogue wash over me like permission. When the credits rolled, I checked the phone one last time, nothing new, just the echo of his impatience fading into the background. I stood up, stretched, and walked to the balcony, where the city was quieter now, the skyline blinking like it was, winking at my growth. I raised the mug to the night and said out loud, "Thank you for showing me exactly where the rope needs to stay." Then I went inside, slipped into bed, and slept deeper than I had in months, dreaming of velvet so thick it muffled every knock that didn't come with respect. The 72 hours that followed were a masterclass in selective silence. He texted once on day 2, a simple good morning with a coffee emoji, like we were picking up where we left off. I left it on read, Crown Post, it number 6 glowing. Consistency isn't a single sunrise. Day 3 brought radio silence from his end, and I felt the shift, not panic, but power. I filled the hours with things that fed me. A Pilates class where the instructor played Amapiano remixes, lunch with my editor discussing my next column on emotional sovereignty, an evening painting my toenails the color of storm clouds, because even thunder deserves to be pretty. On the 3rd night, I lit candles in the living room, the vanilla and sandalwood kind that make the air feel expensive. And I danced alone to Burna Boy, hips moving like they were shaking off residue. The phone stayed on the charger, screen dark, and I realized the silence wasn't empty, it was evidence. Evidence that my absence was felt, that my standards were registered, that my peace was non-negotiable. When the candles burned low, I blew them out one by one, watching the smoke curl like question marks, finding their periods. I crawled into bed with the journal, wrote a single line, Day 72 of silence. He blinked first. Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and let the darkness hold me like a promise kept. The boundaries weren't just holding, they were healing, stitching the places where I used to let chaos in through the side door. And in the quiet of that 3rd night, I understood that real love doesn't storm the velvet rope. It waits patiently in line, dressed in effort, holding a ticket stamped with change. The morning of day 10, I stood in front of the bedroom mirror, wrapped in a towel, hair dripping from the shower, steam still fogging the edges of the glass. I looked at the woman, staring back, cheekbones sharper from the discipline of saying no, eyes clearer from the discipline of seeing truth, and I spoke to her like she was my best friend. "You are enough," I said, voice steady, water dripping onto the hardwood like punctuation. "You were enough when he left, you're enough while he's gone, and you'll be enough if he never learns how to stay." The words hung in the air, heavy and holy, and I felt them settle into my bones like calcium. I grabbed a silk scarf from the dresser, the one with the African wax print my mother brought back from Ghana, and tied my locks back, the fabric cool against my scalp. I chose the white linen dress that makes me feel like a cloud with opinions slipped on gold hoops that catch the light when I turn my head, and walked barefoot to the kitchen where the coffee was already programmed to brew at 6:30. The aroma greeted me like a hug, and I poured it into the mug that says Queen in cursive, because some mornings you need the reminder in writing. I carried the mug to the balcony, the city just waking up, and I leaned against the railing watching the sun paint the buildings peach and gold. My phone was still on the nightstand, but I didn't need it to know the score. 10 days of silence from him, 10 days of noise from me, laughter with friends, pages filled in the journal, playlists that made my hips lie, workouts that made my lungs sing. I finished the coffee, set the mug in the sink, and walked back to the bedroom where the mirror waited for the final sermon. I stood close enough to see the tiny scar above my eyebrow, the one I got at 12 trying to skateboard like the boys, and I traced it with my finger. This, I told my reflection, is where you learned to fall and get up. Don't forget the lesson just because someone finally noticed you're still standing. I opened the closet, pulled out the red bottoms I saved for days when I need to feel the click of power in every step, and slipped them on. The height made me tower, Not over anyone else, but over the version of me who used to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. I grabbed the phone, finally, and opened the message thread. 10 days of my silence, 10 days of his absence, and the last text from him was still that coffee emoji, now looking desperate in the daylight. I typed slowly, deliberately, the words forming like a contract. I'm glad you're reaching out, but I need more than timing. When you're ready to show up with the same energy you expect, we can talk. Until then, take care. I hit send before the old me could negotiate. Then I turned the phone face down and walked out the door. The elevator ride felt like a countdown to something new, and when the lobby doors opened, the security guard greeted me with, "Looking like money, Miss B," and I laughed because I felt like it. Outside, the sun was fully up, the jacarandas dropping purple like confetti for no reason except joy, and I stepped into the day like I was the main character, and the plot was finally catching up to my standards. The mirror sermon wasn't just words, it was a vow renewed every sunrise, a reminder that the woman in the glass doesn't need a co-star to shine. And as I walked to my car, heels clicking purpose into the pavement, I knew that whatever came next, reply or silence, apology or absence, would find me standing tall, dressed in linen and truth, with a heart that had learned to whisper, enough, loud enough for the whole world to hear. The notification pinged at 7:42 that evening, just as I was sliding the garlic naan into the oven for the curry I'd been simmering since noon. I wiped my hands on the apron my niece tie-dyed last Diwali, the colors still bright enough to make me smile, and reached for the phone on the counter. His name glowed, but the preview was longer this time. No emojis, no shortcuts. I let the oven timer tick while I opened the thread. The message read, "I've been thinking about what you said. You're right. I showed up with crumbs when you deserved the whole loaf. I'm not proud of how I left things, and I don't expect instant access. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here, on your timeline, with real effort. No pressure." I read it twice, the curry bubbling behind me like it was applauding the pause. I set the phone down, checked the naan, golden and puffed just right, and carried the tray to the dining table I'd set for one linen napkin folded into a crown because rituals matter. I ate slowly, savoring the heat of the masala, the way the yogurt cooled it on my tongue, the quiet that had become my favorite dinner guest. The message sat open on the screen across the room, patient as a parked car. After the last bite, I poured a glass of water, added a slice of lemon from the tree on my balcony, and walked to the living room where the candles from earlier in the week still held their shape. I lit one, the flame steady, and opened a journal to the page I'd titled 10 Days Later. I wrote the new text, word for word, then drew a line beneath it. Under the line, energy received, effort noted, timeline still mine. I closed the book, picked up the phone, and typed back, "Thank you for hearing me. I'll think about it." That's all I can give right now. I hit send, turned the ringer to silent, and opened Spotify to the playlist I made the night he first disappeared. Songs that used to sting but now felt like scar tissue, proof of healing. I danced in the living room, bare feet on the rug, my grandmother wove, hips moving to the Amapiano beat, that makes Johannesburg feel like it's pulsing inside my chest. The candle flickered, throwing shadows that looked like wings, and I let them carry me through the chorus. When the song faded, I blew out the flame, the smoke curling like a signature on the evening. I walked to the balcony, the city lights spread below like a circuit board of second chances, and I leaned over the railing, letting the breeze lift the hem of my dress. The reply came then, simple and unadorned, "Take all the time you need." I smiled, not because the story was resolved, but because the power dynamic had flipped without a single raised voice. I slipped back inside, washed the dishes by hand because the rhythm soothes me, the warm water running over my fingers like forgiveness I no longer had to beg for. The apartment smelled like curry and candle wax and possibility, and I crawled into bed with the windows open so the night could keep watch. The phone stayed on the charger, screen dark, but its silence now felt like harmony instead of hiatus. In the days that followed, he showed up differently, small, steady gestures. A voice note about a podcast I'd mentioned months ago, a photo of the jacaranda tree outside his office dropping purple like it was apologizing on his behalf, a text at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday asking how my pitch meeting went without demanding an immediate reply. I responded when I felt like it, sometimes hours later, sometimes the next morning, always brief but kind, always from the throne of my own schedule. The velvet rope stayed up, but the line moved forward, one respectful step at a time. Some nights I still journaled, adding new columns. Effort observed, trust rebuilding, peace intact. Other nights I didn't touch the pen because living the boundary was louder than writing it. One Sunday, Lorato came over with champagne and gossip, and we sat on the balcony watching the sunset bleed orange across the skyline. She raised her glass and said, "To the woman who taught chaos how to wait its turn." We clinked, the bubbles tickling my nose, and I told her about the slow drip of his consistency. She listened, then said, "The rope isn't to keep him out forever, it's to let you see if he's willing to dress for the occasion." I laughed, the sound carrying over the rooftops, and I knew she was right. The story didn't end with a grand gesture or a cinematic kiss. It ended with me waking up each morning, choosing myself first, letting the rest unfold at the pace of mutual respect. Whether he earned a permanent seat at the table or remained a polite guest in the lobby, the dining room was mine, the menu was mine, the music was mine. And that, my loves, is the real happily ever after, the kind that doesn't need a +1 to feel complete. If this journey moved you, hit that subscribe button, drop your thoughts in the comments, like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter of women choosing themselves unapologetically.